Welcome to Smart Kids Daily. I'm Alex.
And I'm Jamie. Today we're diving into something amazing, something that will make you look at the world around you in a whole new way. We're going to explore the incredible mind of a super famous detective, a master of solving mysteries, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, Sherlock Holmes? I love those stories. He always figures everything out, even when the police are totally stumped.
That's right, Alex, and he does it with some truly brilliant methods. He doesn't just look for big, obvious clues. He finds the tiny, hidden details that everyone else misses. It's like having X-ray vision for facts.
X-ray vision for facts? That sounds like a superpower.
It kind of is. And today we're going to peek behind the curtain and discover some of his most important superpowers. We'll learn how he uses observation, deduction, disguise, and a deep understanding of people to crack even the most impossible cases. Think of it as learning how to become a real-life puzzle master.
I'm ready. Where do we start?
Let's start with what Sherlock Holmes himself would say is the very first and most important skill, the difference between seeing and observing.
Aren't they the same thing?
That's what many people think. Imagine you walk into your kitchen every morning. You see the table, the chairs, the refrigerator. You know they're there, right?
Yep, I see them.
But if I asked you right now, how many steps are there from your front door to your bedroom? Or how many books are on the top shelf of your bookcase?
I don't know. I see them all the time, but I've never counted the steps or the books.
Exactly. You see them, but you don't observe them. Seeing is just using your eyes to know something is there. Observing is actively paying attention to the details, noticing everything no matter how small. It's like the difference between just glancing at a picture and really studying every single brushstroke and color.
So Sherlock Holmes doesn't just glance at things, he studies them?
Precisely. In one of his most famous adventures, called A Scandal in Bohemia, his friend Dr. Watson was talking to him about this very thing. Holmes asked Watson, "How often have you seen the steps which lead up from the hall to this room?" Watson replied, "Frequently, hundreds of times." Then Holmes asked, "Then how many are there?" And Watson, who had seen them countless times, had to admit, "How many? I don't know."
Haha, that's me with my kitchen.
Holmes then said, "You have not observed, and yet you have seen. That is just my point. Now I know that there are 17 steps because I have both seen and observed."
Wow, 17 steps? He just knew that? That's amazing.
It's all about training your brain to notice. Think of it like a scientist looking through a microscope. They don't just see the cells, they observe their shapes, their movements, the tiniest parts inside them. Or imagine you're playing a video game where you're trying to find a hidden secret. You don't just glance at the screen, you carefully look at every corner, every texture, every shadow, searching for that one tiny clue that everyone else might miss. That's observation. It's active looking, not just passive seeing.
So it's like my eyes are scanners and I need to tell them what to scan for?
Exactly. You're telling your brain, pay attention. Here's another quick example from the same story. Holmes once told Watson that he knew the window in Watson's bedroom was on the right side. Watson was completely confused, asking, "How on earth?" Holmes explained that because Watson shaved every morning, and the left side of his face was always a little less cleanly shaved than the right, it meant that the light wasn't hitting that side as well. If the window were on the left, it would be the other way around.
That's wild. Just from seeing how someone shaves, he knows where their window is? My mind is blown.
It's all about combining sharp observation with a bit of logical thinking, which brings us to Holmes' next big superpower, the power of trifles. Or, as he put it, the little things are infinitely the most important.
So tiny details are super important?
Absolutely. Imagine you're playing a video game where you need to find a hidden treasure. The game might scatter little clues everywhere, a small scratch on a wall, a misplaced item, a faint sound. If you only look for a huge treasure map, you'll miss everything. But if you pay attention to every tiny clue, they eventually lead you to the treasure. Trifles are those tiny, often overlooked details that, when put together, tell a massive story. Think of them like the individual Lego bricks that by themselves don't look like much, but when you connect them just right, they become an incredible castle or a spaceship.
Like finding all the hidden gems in a platformer game.
Exactly. Sherlock Holmes uses these trifles to build a picture of what happened and who was involved. Let me tell you about a case that really shows this, called the Red-Headed League.
Oh, I've heard of that one. It sounds funny.
It is, but it starts with a puzzle. A gentleman named Mr. Jabez Wilson, who has fiery red hair, comes to Holmes with a very strange problem. He got a job paying really well just for having red hair and copying an encyclopedia. But then, after 8 weeks, the Red-Headed League suddenly disappeared.
That is weird. Why would someone pay a lot of money just for red hair and copying words?
That's what Holmes wanted to figure out. Before Mr. Wilson even spoke, Holmes started observing. He noticed Mr. Wilson's hands were very different sizes.
Different sizes? How?
One hand was noticeably larger and more muscular than the other. Holmes immediately deduced that Mr. Wilson had done a lot of manual labor at some point, meaning he used his hands for hard physical work. He also noticed a shiny patch on Mr. Wilson's right cuff and a smooth patch on his left elbow. What do you think that suggested?
Maybe he rested his elbow on a desk a lot?
Close. It suggested he spent a lot of time writing, probably leaning his elbow on a desk and his cuff rubbing against the paper. And then Holmes saw a tattoo of a fish on Mr. Wilson's wrist, stained with a delicate pink color. He knew from his vast knowledge that this specific type of tattoo with that particular pink stain could only have been done in China. These aren't just random facts. They are trifles, tiny bits of information that when combined paint a picture.
Hold on, so from his hands, his shirt, and a tattoo, Holmes knew he worked hard, wrote a lot, and had been to China?
Precisely. These weren't just random facts. They were trifles that painted a picture of the man. And this wasn't even about the mystery yet. It was just about observing the client, gathering those tiny pieces of the puzzle before the real game even began.
So he uses these tiny clues to learn about people even before they say anything?
That's right. In another case, a case of identity, a young lady named Miss Mary Sutherland came to Holmes because her fiancé, Mr. Hosmer Angel, had vanished right before their wedding. Holmes immediately noticed some things about her. He saw a double line on her wrist, just above the cuff, perfectly defined. He also noticed that the boots she was wearing didn't quite match. One had a fancy toe, the other was plain, and they were buttoned differently. Plus, one of her gloves was torn and stained with violet ink.
Whoa. What does all that mean?
Well, the double line on her wrist told him she spent a lot of time working at a typewriter. It was a friction mark. The odd half-buttoned boots suggested she had left her home in a great hurry, not taking the time to fasten them correctly. And the violet ink stain on her finger and glove meant she had written a letter in a rush, dipping her pen too deep, probably right before she left. So many details from just a quick look.
So he knew she worked, rushed out, and wrote a letter just from looking at her?
Exactly. He didn't need to ask her. Her clothes and appearance told him a story. This keen eye for detail, the appreciation for trifles, is what helps him piece together the puzzle. And speaking of puzzles, these little details aren't just for figuring out who someone is, but also what happened, which brings us to deduction, connecting the dots.
How does he connect them? Like a connect the dots picture?
Better. Imagine you have a bunch of puzzle pieces scattered on a table. Observation is finding each piece, maybe even figuring out its color and shape. Deduction is figuring out how they fit together to form the complete picture, even if you don't know what the picture is yet. It's like being a super smart video game player who notices small changes in the environment, remembers character quirks, and uses all that information to predict the final boss's next move.
So it's not just seeing, it's figuring out what it all means together.
Precisely. Let's go back to the Red-Headed League case. Holmes took all those strange details, Mr. Wilson's high salary for doing nothing but copying an encyclopedia, the assistant who worked for half wages, the sudden closing of the League office, and, importantly, they wanted Mr. Wilson out of his pawnbroker shop for 4 hours every day.
That's a big clue.
Right! Holmes deduced that the whole Red-Headed League was a trick to get Mr. Wilson out of his house for a specific time each day. Why? Because the assistant, Vincent Spaulding, worked for very little money, meaning he had a strong secret motive for being there. Holmes also noticed the assistant was very fond of photography and would often disappear into the cellar to develop his pictures.
The cellar. That's a good clue.
Indeed, Holmes suspected the assistant was doing something important in the cellar. When he went to Mr. Wilson's shop, he didn't just look at the shop itself. He walked around the block and observed the buildings behind it. He even thumped his walking stick on the pavement.
Why would he do that?
He was checking if the cellar extended out under the street to see where the assistant might be tunneling. A hollow sound would mean a tunnel was there. Then, when the assistant opened the door, Holmes specifically looked at his trousers, noticing they were worn and stained at the knees. This confirmed his suspicion. The assistant had been spending hours on his knees, digging a tunnel. He then saw that a major bank was right next door to Mr. Wilson's pawn shop, so the whole elaborate red-headed scheme was designed to clear the path for a bank robbery.
Whoa! So the little details about the assistant, the strange job, the worn knees, the thumping on the pavement, and the nearby bank all connected to form one big plan to rob a bank.
Exactly. That's deduction in action. It's like assembling a giant jigsaw puzzle. Each piece, the cheap assistant, the weird job, the worn knees, the thumped pavement, seemed random alone, but Holmes's mind could see how they all interlocked to create the picture of a bank robbery. He didn't just see the individual pieces, he saw the connections between them to form a whole new understanding.
That makes so much sense. It's like his brain is a supercomputer putting all the information together.
It is, but sometimes observing and deducing aren't enough. Sometimes you need to get inside the mystery, literally. This leads to another of Holmes's fascinating methods, disguise and impersonation.
Like putting on a fake mustache and glasses?
Much more than that. Holmes is a master actor. He can completely transform himself to gather information that he couldn't get otherwise. He changes his voice, his posture, his clothes, even his personality. He becomes the character, not just dresses up as one. It's like a chameleon changing its colors perfectly to blend into any background.
He must have a closet full of costumes.
He certainly does. Remember our A Scandal in Bohemia case? After the king asked for help, Holmes wanted to investigate Miss Irene Adler's house without being recognized. So he disguised himself first as a jobless groom.
A groom? Like someone who takes care of horses?
Yes, he knew that people who work with horses often share a lot of information and gossip. By pretending to be one of them, he quickly learned all about Irene Adler's daily routine, her visitors, and even who her lawyer was. Then, to get inside the house, he transformed again. This time, he put on a broad black hat, baggy trousers, and a sympathetic smile, looking like a kindly, simple-minded clergyman.
So he can be anyone? A groom 1 minute, a priest the next?
That's the idea. And this disguise was crucial for his plan. He even used it to create a fake emergency to get Miss Adler to reveal where she was hiding a secret photograph. But we'll come back to that in a moment. But the most incredible example of disguise and how it can completely fool people comes from the man with the twisted lip.
Tell me.
In this story, a wealthy gentleman named Neville St. Clair mysteriously disappears from an opium den, a rather unpleasant place in London. His wife is sure he's been murdered. The police find his clothes in the den, and they arrest a hideous-looking beggar named Hugh Boone, who has a twisted lip and a shock of red hair, as the main suspect.
So they think Hugh Boone murdered Neville St. Clair? That's the natural conclusion, especially with the bloody traces and the disappearance of Mr. St. Clair. But Holmes isn't convinced. He visits the opium den himself, where he observes a lot. And he even disguises himself as a very old, sickly opium smoker to avoid detection. He went undercover? That's so cool. He did. And he then visits Hugh Boone in his prison cell. The inspector says Boone is incredibly dirty and refuses to wash. Holmes, with a twinkle in his eye, says, "I had an idea that he might, and I took the liberty of bringing the tools with me." And guess what he pulls out his bag? A magnifying glass? A secret key? No, a huge bath sponge. The inspector is confused, but Holmes asks him to quietly open the cell door. He then walks up to the sleeping beggar, dips the sponge in water, and vigorously rubs it across Boone's face. What? That's a crazy move. And then the most astonishing thing happens. The dirty, disfigured face of the beggar starts to peel away. The hideous scar, the twisted lip, the bright red hair, they all disappear. Underneath the grime and makeup is the clean-shaven, refined face of Mr. Neville St. Clair himself. No way. He was the beggar all along?
He was. Neville St. Clair, the wealthy gentleman, was secretly leading a double life as a beggar to earn huge amounts of money, far more than his respectable job. The disappearance was just him quickly changing from his Neville St. Clair clothes into his beggar disguise, and then throwing his own rich clothes out the window, weighted down with coins to make it look like he was murdered.
That is the ultimate disguise. He fooled everyone, even his own wife. And Holmes figured it out with a sponge?
It wasn't just the sponge, it was all the little observations and deductions leading up to it. Holmes had already suspected something was off. He had noticed the beggar seemed too professional, too well rehearsed for a simple street person, and he used the sponge to test his theory. And this brings us to another key aspect of Holmes's genius, his psychological insight and his way of testing theories.
So he tries to understand how people think and what they would do?
Exactly. He's a master at understanding human nature. It's like knowing how all the different characters in a video game will react to certain situations, so you can predict their next move. In A Scandal in Bohemia, after Holmes, disguised as the clergyman, was carried into Irene Adler's house after a fake fight, remember that?
Oh yeah, where he faked being hurt.
Right! Once inside, he knew he needed to find the secret photograph. He couldn't just search the house because that would reveal his deception. So he had Dr. Watson, who was waiting outside, throw a smoke rocket through the window and yell, "Fire!"
So he faked a fire?
He did. And why? Because Holmes knew that when a person believes their house is on fire, their first instinct is to rush to save the thing they value most. He explained, a married woman grabs at her baby. An unmarried one reaches for her jewel box. He had learned from previous cases that this was an almost unbreakable instinct. And sure enough, when the fake fire alarm went off, Irene Adler rushed to a hidden panel, pulled out the photograph, and then quickly put it back when she realized it was a false alarm. Holmes saw exactly where it was hidden.
That is so smart. He used what he knew about people to trick her into showing him the clue.
It's a brilliant example of psychological insight, combined with setting up a test. Holmes also uses this insight to tell when someone is lying or telling the truth. In the Boscombe Valley mystery, the son James McCarthy was accused of murdering his father. He said that his father had cried out, "Cooey," a special call they used, before his father even knew he was there. The police thought this was a lie, because why would his father yell "Cooey" if he didn't know James was coming? But Holmes believed him.
Why?
Because James also mentioned that his dying father mumbled something about a rat. The police thought he was delirious, meaning confused from injury. But Holmes thought, what if it wasn't rat, but just part of a longer word? He sent a telegram for a map of a certain region in Australia, and when he received it, he placed his finger over part of the map, revealing A-R-A-T. Then he moved his finger, and it revealed the full name, Ballarat.
Ballarat! That's a place in Australia.
Bingo! Holmes realized the father wasn't mumbling about a rat, but was trying to say Ballarat, which connected to his past in Australia and the person he was meeting. The cooey wasn't for his son, but for the person from Ballarat he had an appointment with. This showed Holmes that the son was telling the truth, and he used this insight to unravel the real killer's motive and identity. He didn't just hear the words, he understood the context and the human element behind them.
Wow, so he puts himself in other people's shoes to figure out the truth, even if it seems strange at first.
Precisely, and all of these methods, keen observation, detailed analysis of trifles, clever disguises, and psychological insight, are supercharged by one more thing: Holmes's incredible specialized knowledge. His brain is like a giant library or an internet search engine that always has the exact obscure piece of information needed.
Like knowing about China tattoos.
Exactly. Holmes has a mind filled with all sorts of unusual facts, which he collects and organizes meticulously. He knows about different types of soil from various parts of London, the history of tattoos and where certain styles originate, the habits of criminals, the make and model of countless vehicles, and even the tiny details of different typewriters.
He knows about typewriters? Like old-fashioned keyboards?
Yes, in a case of identity, when Mr. Hosmer Angel disappeared, all the letters he sent were typewritten. Holmes examined them closely and noticed tiny, unique defects in certain letters, like a slightly slurred E or a tailless R. He explained that a typewriter has really quite as much individuality as a man's handwriting. Later, when he confronted Miss Sutherland's stepfather, Mr. Windibank, about the disappearance, he showed him that the exact same unique defects were present in letters written by the stepfather on his own office typewriter. This proved that Mr. Windibank was Mr. Hosmer Angel, disguised.
So he knows so many random facts, and they all help him solve cases.
Absolutely. It's like having every power-up and special move available in a video game. In the 5 Orange Pips, a young man received a mysterious letter with 5 dried orange pips inside, followed by a series of strange deaths in his family. Holmes noticed the postmarks on the letters, one from Pondicherry, India, another from Dundee, Scotland, and a third from London. He knew that the farther away the postmark, the longer it took for the person who sent it to arrive by sailing ship. He also had vast knowledge of secret societies and their symbols.
So the shipping time was a clue?
Yes. By calculating the travel time of sailing ships, he deduced that the senders were members of a secret society called the Ku Klux Klan, whose warnings often included orange pips, and that they were likely on board a particular ship called the Lone Star. His knowledge of historical secret societies and maritime travel were crucial to understanding the pattern of the attacks and predicting the killer's movements. Without that specialized knowledge, those postmarks would just be random places on a map. But for Holmes, they were vital pieces of the puzzle.
That's incredible. So if you want to be like Sherlock Holmes, you have to look closely at everything, remember small details, think about how people behave, and learn all sorts of interesting facts.
You've got it, Alex. It's about training your brain to be an active observer and a logical thinker. Every little detail can be a clue, and every puzzle has a solution if you know how to look for it. It's about becoming a master of your own mind, learning to connect the pieces of information all around you. Everyone has the potential to be a detective. It just takes practice and a curious spirit.
I'm going to start counting the steps in my house right now and look for trifles in my neighborhood. Maybe I'll even learn about different kinds of trees.
That's the spirit. And if you want to dive even deeper into the world of Sherlock Holmes and see all these amazing methods in action, we highly recommend checking out the book, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. It's packed with thrilling mysteries and clever solutions that will inspire your inner detective. You can find it at your local library or bookstore, and trust me, you won't regret it. What an adventure!
It truly was. I've learned so much about how to think like a detective today.
Thanks for listening to Smart Kids Daily. See you next time.